Are you looking to become a Mensch?
Welcome to the Mensch Podcast.
Today we're speaking with Roman Polnar. Roman is the founder and managing partner of Pillar 6 Advisors, a boutique wealth management and financial planning firm based in San Francisco. After 10 years in the corporate world, Roman left in 2010 to build a firm on his own terms, one that listens first and puts clients ahead of profits. He's also a partner at Pillar 6 College Planning, helping families find a path to debt-free education.
But what really sets Roman apart is how deeply his work is into the Jewish community. He serves on the board of Hebrew Free Loan, the Bay Area nonprofit that provides interest-free loans rooted in the Jewish mitzvah of Gemulit Chasadim to help people through hardship and pursue their dreams. He's also part of the Jewish Federation of the Greater Bay Area's Professional Advisor Network, where he helps Jewish families align their financial planning with philanthropic values, thinking through legacy, charitable giving, and how their money can reflect what they actually believe, incorporating Jewish values along the whole journey.
And it's clearly personal. Roman is also a named supporter and leader of the Jewish Parent Academy, a program built specifically for Russian-speaking Jewish parents to reconnect with Jewish heritage, identity, and learning. Roman helped champion the launch of the Palo Alto chapter, showing his impact as a true leader in our community.
Outside of all that, Roman hosts the Pillar 6 podcast, interviewing entrepreneurs and thought leaders on finance, leadership, and resilience. And when he's not working or giving back, swimming from Alcatraz, cycling long distances, sailing the bay, or home with his wife and their 3 kids.
Thank you for being here and welcome, Roman.
Thank you, guys. A wonderful introduction. Thank you. Very kind of you.
Yeah, thank you for being here. We're going to just jump right in. So you're a financial advisor, a firm founder. You're also a podcast host, a father of 3, and you're very passionate about endurance and you're an athlete. So give us maybe the minute condensed version of how you got there and your values relating to that.
Well, I wish I could say I do all of those things, more or less at the same time, but I find that life is so busy these days that I don't get to do any of those as much as I'd like to. But it was definitely a big part of something I enjoyed doing. So if I had to cut something out, it was now my endurance athletic endeavors that are taking a little bit of a back seat. But, nothing happens in life overnight. It's all part of the process. And so you kind of figure out, like I did, either what was missing and what I felt like I really needed. And I was also inspired by other people that help give an example or pave the way. It's a hard question to answer because there's a lot in there that you asked, but I think you asked if there were any values. I would say maybe not so much of a value, but a personal belief is to approach life with intention. So when you see something that you need to do or should do, you do it.
Yeah, you mentioned kind of how you had a lot of mentors along the way. Is there maybe one that really stood out to you, and maybe what did they help lead you with, and maybe how did they change you to get you to the person you are today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think every single mentor deserves their own moment in the spotlight and their due. And I can't say there was one more impactful than the other because they're all incredibly impactful. But I would say a lot of times people, my mentors, and maybe you guys have something similar in your lives, they don't have like a badge that says, I'm a mentor. These are people that you come across in your daily life, and they might not officially be a mentor, but you'll learn something from them that has a tremendous impact, or it has changes or shifts something in the way that you think or feel about something. So in that way, they can become an incredible mentor without being an official one. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that if you're looking for opportunities for a mentor to impact you, you'll find your mentor in almost daily life.
I think, yeah, that's a great point. I think that also addresses maybe a big misconception, when people think of mentors, like who's your mentor? They think of someone maybe that's been there their whole lives or, has that badge that you talked about. It's kind of like out there, but that's not necessarily the case. Like obviously, especially with your case too, there's many times where, you can have multiple mentors. Like even if someone makes you think differently about a question or inspires you to do something or opens you up to a new field you didn't know you were interested in, I mean, that's definitely a mentor. It's someone that guided you to a new area and opened up a new part of you. So I think that's great that you're kind of allowing for our audience to see that there's more than just kind of this overarching and, pompous title into being a mentor. It can be kind of broken down and applied to many more people. So just transitioning a little bit, give us maybe a little bit of a look into your Jewish background. You're obviously a very staunch local Jewish leader, but always having this strong connection to Judaism. Were you raised secular? And what has been your overall experience with Judaism?
Now, those are all really big questions. And I'll try to start from the beginning, which is to say that not at all did I have any formal Jewish background, because I was born in the former Soviet Union when it was still a communist country. No one really practiced religion, but I knew I was Jewish, but that was, created for me in the traditional sense, like in your family or in your Jewish community. I think we were all branded as being Jewish because it was in our documents, like it was in your birth certificate, it was in your passport. Often didn't get the promotion or an opportunity to study something because you were Jewish. So it was really an external label as opposed to that internal sense of knowledge and pride and real comfort with who you were. In that way, just a long way to answer your first question, I did not in any way grow up with a formal Jewish background. But, I came to the US as a young teen. I was 12 years old and I had a bar mitzvah in New York, and my first exposure to Jewish life. And I'll be honest, it felt just as foreign to me as I felt when we first came to the US, and none of us spoke any English. And so it was a jarring experience, but quite frankly, so was being in a very Hasidic, household that hosted us for the weekend. It was just very, very unfamiliar. And ironically, the most amount that I learned about Judaism was in a Jesuit university. Because I went to USF, University of San Francisco, and one of the classes I took was, I think it was called World Religions or Religions of the World. And one of the religions that we studied was Judaism. And all of a sudden, I just had these like daily aha moments because I realized that all of the things that I've been taught by my parents and grandparents and my aunts and uncles and cousins in the community that I thought were kind of Russian values or Russian way of doing things, and they were actually Jewish. And I don't know that my parents even knew a lot of the things that they practiced because they inherited those as well, but we carried them on very quietly and very privately. And we didn't know what things were called, but we felt them. And I think after college, and I don't know if I missed answering one of the questions that you asked from the beginning, but I think you asked sort of what led to or launched us and me in the Jewish kind of community sense. And it was really that kind of putting together all of these different pieces that I had within me. I just didn't really see them for what they were. So that's where we are, or at least that's where the journey began of us taking a more active role in Jewish life.
Yeah, I think that's like a really amazing story. I think I actually met one of your coworkers at actually the Hebrew Loan, Ilya Vinogradsky, and he, I think, had a really similar story in the Soviet Union where in first grade he mentioned when we were out advocating actually at JPAC, I think the other day, he mentioned how in first grade in the Soviet Union, his teacher made a list of all the nationalities in the class, and when it got to him, she like stated Jewish, and that kind of like caused a lot of him to get like discriminated against, and was really hard in the Soviet Union, I know. So that's especially meaningful to see how you were able to eventually reconnect with your heritage where you couldn't maybe back in the Soviet Union.
For finance to build your own company, what led you to that journey, and what did you want to do differently that you weren't seeing in your own career kind of from your experience?
There's the kind of the more technical and practical answer to that question. And then there's also a deeper seated feeling that really motivated those decisions to be made. So I'll give you two short answers, but I think the practical one, if you're asking just in general, like why would someone leave corporate job and start their own business? That's crazy. You're getting a job, you have income, and then you all of a sudden go to, start your own business. There's no certainty, and there's a lot of things that you give up. And I think that's because I saw that the corporate world was really not doing, or at least the companies that I worked with, our clients, but they all said, right? We were all taught and trained to say that we're here to serve you. We're here to do what's right for you. We're here to help you. But in those behind the scenes sales and management meetings, they were saying, how much money did you make for the company? And how many sales did you make? And when you come up short and realize or tell them that this wasn't the right fit for somebody, they'll say, well, why didn't you make it so that they would think that it was the right fit? And that just went so against the grain for me that I decided I couldn't do that anymore. And that's when I left. And so I said, when people do it different, or when we wanted to do things differently, is to actually do what was needed to help somebody and never trick them into anything that they didn't need.
I think that's a great origin story, you could say, for your firm. I mean, I love like the values that it was founded on, serving the clients before the profits, really, and like listening to what the client needs instead of really inserting your own opinion into what, you know, you think the client should be doing, and being receptive to that. And you probably didn't think of it this way when you were starting the firm, but to me, it reminds me a lot of Jewish values, and specifically tzedek, which is the idea that you serve people and not just transactions. And this shows up a lot in Jewish history and the Torah. I was just going to ask, do you see your work through that lens of serving people before transactions? And has that philosophy allowed you to create more personal and meaningful connections with your clients, you would say, compared to your previous career?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the short answer. I think it's incredibly important to know what your values are and to live them every day in every aspect of your life, whether it's at work, at school, at home, in the community, with friends. You show up exactly how you are and who you want to be. And I think that should translate throughout our life in every realm of our life.
Yeah, I think that's actually amazing how you're able to not have to, especially in the current economy and how it's kind of going right now with a lot of businesses, focus on the profits, but still care for the people. And in the end, your just compassion for the people will help you eventually and help you financially in the end. And kind of segueing, how important do you think the skill of financial literacy is for the generation to learn? Because as you may know, this podcast kind of is geared to kids going to college, and that's when I think financial literacy and planning is almost the most important.
No, I think it is incredibly important. It is unfortunately not being taught. And if it is being taught, I don't think it's being taught in the right way. So, I mean, maybe your experience is different. You can tell me if you learned this in school, but, you know, did you ever have a class that like taught you the right things to do financially?
No, I mean, there's a very, very optional personal finance course, which is, I think, only one semester long offered at our school, but I think very minimal amounts of students actually take it. So the only real kind of not even introductory course to finance, but the only real exposure kids get is second semester of our senior year. We have to take economics. And so I think there's definitely a gap, because obviously financial literacy is such an important life skill. So it's definitely not taught enough.
So how would you design something if you had like a blank canvas and someone said, like, design this perfect class that you never got a chance to take? How would you want to structure it? What would you teach?
I think the primary goal of schools that people often overlook is not just to like build knowledge or like arbitrary knowledge, but it's like to give students the platform and the ability to succeed in life. And by doing that, you need to give them life skills. So I think in an introductory class, you might not teach the most exciting stuff, but you have to teach the fundamentals. So I think that should be the place where you teach high schoolers how to file taxes, you know, how to manage a budget, how to take care of their own finances, because so many children are graduating, they're in college, and they're drowning because they don't understand how to budget their money. They don't understand how to file their taxes. So I think that's a financial crisis right now in the US. So I think that's where I would start as my foundation for my class. I'm not sure what Rob, you would say.
No, I actually personally, I think, agree to that more or less. I think it's really important to teach students to like look at how much they make, because they maybe come from maybe a different lifestyle than the life that they might have to live throughout college. They're going to be finally independent, and that kind of changes their sources of income, I think, to a greater extent. And I think it's super important just to teach budgeting. I think maybe the first skill, as I think it's the most crucial to be taught.
Yeah. I appreciate you guys sharing what you think is missing. I completely agree with you. And looking back, I wish I had learned a lot of these things as well. But I think having gone through so many years of actually working now, I might be kind of far away from what I remember in high school, but what I will say, in addition to everything that you said, which is completely true, is I would say if you can also help young people learn, like students learn how to plan ahead, because I think planning is the piece that's really missing, not just in the financial literacy realm, but just in general. It's like everything is moving so quick and it's just like immediate access to just about anything. Like it's in the palm of our hand. You've got the smartphone, you can watch anything, you can talk to anyone, you can, communicate with anyone, you can do just about anything. And I think that trains us to just like get it now. And usually the things that we want now are not necessarily the right things for the long term. And so I think having that ability to look kind of around the corner, beyond the horizon, and plan ahead, and especially when it comes to your like finances, would be amazing. And it's like if you don't have a goal, you just kind of going through life without having a clear direction of where you're going. How do you know when you get there? I think, and that's one of the reasons financially, so many young people, like, especially when they get out of high school, go to college, they end up with so much debt, is because they just didn't really think about what it was going to be like when they graduate college. Because so many, I think, people still, and I remember feeling the same way. It's like my goal was just to get into a good college. It's like that was where all my attention went. And then when I was in college, it's like, how do I learn and have a great time? But the reality is, it's when we graduate college is when, like, that's the starting line. So if we think about it that way, like, who wants to show up at the starting line of a marathon wearing, like, 100 pounds of extra weight, and you have to lug that with you for, 24 miles. So I think financially it's the same thing. It's like if you can help young people prepare themselves so that when they graduate college, they're free of debt. Like you've got your finances set, you've got good jobs or starting business and whatever else. What an amazing outcome you can have. So much easier than somebody else who's starting in the back of the line.
Yeah, I mean, I think the golden answer here, I think our audience should have that. And for anyone watching, I mean, if you're going to college soon, you should definitely plan out your finances. Don't just get in, like Roman said, and take it from there. You should plan out year by year your finances, look toward the future, see how much debt you're going to graduate with, see your opportunities from there, and really plan out into the future, like 5, 10, 15 years in the future, not just, if I can get into this college, then I'll go. I think it's much more important. And I think the long-term planning that you were talking about is crucial, and it's definitely a factor that young people are missing because I would say they're very short-sighted as of now. They're living in the teenage years, the kind of the indestructible youth, so they kind of lose sight of the future and that there's going to be so many more responsibilities and that they might be drowning in debt in just a few years. So
yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a lot of fun to think about the future and be practical and be responsible. Some people have that, just it's part of who they are, but not everybody. And, in fact, it's really interesting. Statistically speaking, adults, right? Adults with families, people who you think should have all of their together and, they should know what they're doing. Statistically, an average American spends more time planning their annual vacation than they spend planning their finances. So it's not just the young people in high school or college. Yeah. This is across the board. This is just an area. If someone doesn't have it part, like anything else, you started off asking a really great question about Jewish values. It's if you have it in you because somebody taught you, your parents, your grandparents, you'll probably already have some of these financial management skills, but not because you learned it from a class. You learned it just through osmosis, your family. If you're fortunate to be friends with, the right group of kids, awesome, you pick and learn from one another. But if you don't have access to that, if you're not, then it's much harder to make these decisions. And we can have a completely separate conversation about college, because that's one of the, and I'll just mention it very briefly because I think that's who your listeners are. And I hope you really pay attention to this, but I remember listening and watching Charlie Kirk when he would go online and say college is a scam. And I it's a very controversial thing to say. I know what he's saying or was saying. Unfortunately, he's not saying it anymore, but I think it's not a scam. You shouldn't go to college, but don't blindly assume that you have to go to college and you have to go to a certain type of college in order to be successful, because that's not true. Yeah. The fact is, you should definitely go to college, whether it's trade school or 4-year school. Like, your life will be better. You'll earn more money. You'll have a better career. You'll have a better network of friends and like community that you've picked up along the way, like, or built along the way. But that's because you went to college. There's literally no proof, and there's nothing to demonstrate that if you went to college A versus college D, E, F, that you had different outcomes. That only applies to a very, very small group of majors. Like, you just have to get into an Ivy League for a certain major. For the majority, like 95% of the people, going to college is the result, not going to a specific college. And so many colleges are just now, and not just colleges, there's so many publications and websites, and there's a whole industry that's built around college to make you believe that if you don't go to the top 20 or top 50, then it's not worth going, like you failed. And the amount of pressure that you guys are on is insane. Like, we have a teenage, not a teenage, she's a sophomore in high school. And the kind of pressure that I see, kids being under is insane. So, I'd say don't go into debt yourself or force your parents to do it just to get into some high ticket, or high price college, just because that's what your friends think of school, or that's what you read in the top 20, top 50 list. Like, go where the value is. Because like I said, graduating college, that's the starting line. That's not the finish line.
I think that's a really good point. I think I personally as well sometimes look at college as a ranking, and that I have to go to the best college I can, and finances don't really matter. And I think that's really important. And I know you sit on the board of Hebrew Free Loan, which is rooted in the ancient concept of Gemach, which is interest-free lending kind of. And I know personally, I think Mark's sister actually had help in college. I don't know if you.
Yeah, she I think she did get the Hebrew Free Loan. She went to college a few years back. She went to UC Berkeley. So for those who don't know what that means, and what the Hebrew Free Loan actually does, can you maybe explain briefly what it provides and your role in it, and why you as a financial advisor with your background care so deeply about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to. So, Mark, similar to your sister, I also got a Hebrew Free Loan in college. And that was my first experience with the organization as a whole. I didn't know anything about it, but, I took on some debt. And by the way, I was a total dummy when I went to college, because I didn't know any of the stuff that we're talking about now. So the fact that you're having these conversations with people, and with me in this case, I mean, bravo to you guys. That's awesome. Like, the fact that you took the initiative to do this, you're not only helping a great number of people who are hopefully going to be listening to you and your podcast, but you're also helping yourselves, because the teacher often learns just as much, if not more, than the student. So well done, first and foremost.
Thank you.
Amazing. And that can answer your question. When I said I was a dummy, I really honestly didn't know any of this stuff. I didn't know financial aid. I didn't know how to apply. And our parents were just so busy working, they didn't know any of this stuff. This was totally foreign to them. So when I actually went to college, I ended up spending far more money than I should have paid. And that's in part because I didn't do the forms correctly. I didn't submit them on time. It's like the little stuff that if you miss, you're just leaving money on the table. And I literally made every single mistake in the book. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate now about helping, young people and their families not overpay for college, because little things that you can do today will just save you a ton of money. Anyways, I didn't do that. So when I got this huge bill from the bursar's office at USF, it was like, oh crap, like, how am I going to pay for this? And, my parents helped. And then somehow, and I don't remember how, someone said, go to Hebrew Free Loan, which is one of the oldest Jewish nonprofits in the Bay Area. It's been around for over 100 years. 1897, I want to say, is when it was founded. And it was founded when, a few men were sitting studying the Torah. And in the Torah, it said that you should not charge interest from a fellow man in need. And so I think they were putting literally 50 cents at the time into the pushka per person until they had enough money to lend to whoever the first person would have been. And as it just so happens, the first person was a business loan. It was a merchant who needed to buy a push cart to sell his wares in San Francisco. And the first loan that they made was $5,
Wow.
which at the time helped this man launch a small business. And so as that first person began to repay his loan, and these men were continuing to put 50 cents into their bushka, and it just kept growing, and the interest kept coming back, and they kept giving out more loans and more loans. And so, fast forward 100 plus years, and, it's now a very meaningful organization in Northern California, helping, Jewish individuals and their families overcome life's challenges or take advantage of opportunities. And so we have small business loans, student loans are one of our biggest areas, and all sorts of loans like debt consolidation, buying your first home, starting a family, etc. So it's based on the premise that you give out interest-free loans. You don't charge interest. You don't profit from people who are in need.
I think, I actually never knew that about the story about San Francisco and the 50 cents. I think that's very beautiful, and it shows, the beauty of the Jewish values of how we always are commanded to take care of those in need and those poorer than us. And I think that's very impactful. And for everyone listening, I think it's a great opportunity to, get help and even some aid when you're going to college. They can guide you through it per se, and, give you the financial base that you need to, be confident about your financial situation throughout college.
And Mark, if I may, I just want to say one more thing. You just reminded me of something, because you're absolutely right. It's like, take note, because these resources, we have them in our community, but it's amazing how many people don't know that it exists. And this is an organization. It's just the one. There's so many, places where you can learn, where you can get help. And I just reflected, I remember when I was going in to apply for a loan, I was so nervous. Like, I had no idea what to expect. I felt like I was going to be judged, like I didn't have the money. I'm coming like with my, hand out, like, please help me. Like I had my sob story, like practiced it in my head if I really needed to, turn on the, not quite the waterworks, but, like I really need help. And I think when I remember just going in, feeling defensive about this whole process. And from the moment that I sat down and the person that was interviewing me, all of that tension, all that defensiveness, it just all I remember melted away. And we just began having a conversation. They started asking me questions, and I felt like I was sitting in like my aunt's living room. It just felt so good and so caring and so non-judgmental. And I remember when I left, I was standing taller, my shoulders were squared, my chin was up. I felt so proud, to be part of the Jewish community. And I remember vowing to myself, like, one day I want to be kind of like someone sitting on that other side of the table, making someone else feel like they made me feel. And so I only say this not so much to go over my own story, but just to say that that hasn't changed. And I think that's been the same from the founding of this organization. And so when you apply for like a student loan, at least I can speak for Hebrew Free Loan, you don't just get the money. There's just so many additional ways that you find support through, even the questions that you're being asked. It makes you really articulate to yourself why you're taking this loan, what you want to do with it. And it creates a sense of obligation. Look, there's zero interest loan. It's like, if you're going to pay off any loan, like if you just look at this financially and you've got a credit card that charges you 20% and Hebrew Free Loan that charges you 0, which one are you financially motivated to pay off first? Right? The one that's charging you 20%. But yet, if you look at the average default rate for a traditional student loan, some of them go as far as 30, 40%. Hebrew Free Loan has a repayment rate of over 99.8%, which means people feel so connected, grateful, and sense of responsibility, like obligation to pay it back, because they know when they pay their loan back, they're actually also paying it forward. Because every dollar that you pay back of your own loan, someone else can now have a loan for the needs that they might have in their own family. So I think it's just a beautiful circle that I don't know if there's a Jewish value for the circle, but it is absolutely from strength to strength and honoring the commitments that we make.
I think wonderful. I definitely see parallels between what you described and the trust with the Hebrew Free Loan and your own firm that you started. I mean, you mentioned how the Hebrew Free Loan, it has such a high 99.8% non-defaulting rate, which signifies the trust, as you said, that they have, which is, I think, as a result of the not-for-profit approach that the Hebrew Free Loan takes, because it's not like when you go in to get a loan, it's not like a business transaction per se. It's like you're being invited into this community, and so you feel obligated to pay it back, and you have this motivation to also help someone just as you were helped. And earlier at the beginning, when you were laughing when you said, you came with arms outstretched, it was a point of insecurity maybe, but I think it's actually very serious. I think there's definitely like a stigma around getting loans for young people right now. A lot of young people, they don't want to talk about it. They also could be insecure of their financial situation. And there's certainly like a sort of stigma where people aren't obviously they're not excited, but they don't even know where to begin in the financial loan process. So I think just kickstarting that and, providing these opportunities such as a Hebrew Free Loan, maybe to a wider population, will help. Just connecting it to another point will help even bridge more financial literacy for the youth, and it'll break the stigma that I was talking about.
Yeah, I absolutely agree and hope so. And I think being part of a community, and particularly the Jewish community, is really important, because I think it's just also rooted in it's in our DNA. We help one another, and we try to lift each other up and suspend it of judgment. And I think that's exactly what Hebrew Free Loan in this example is. It's not a handout. It's a kind of a hand up, so to speak. So for all of your listeners, I hope they'll feel more comfortable, and embarrassment should not even be in that sentence, but quite the opposite. Is getting an education, I think, is absolutely one of the most important things that you can do, in a sense of pride. So go do it. And there's a community here to help you. So take advantage of it.
Yeah. Transitioning more into the future and your outlooks, how do you see the shifting world affecting my generation and the new youth, maybe your kids? Obviously, the hot topic right now is AI. So in this new age, how are you raising your kids to adapt to new circumstances? And what advice do you have for kids my age as they enter a new job market and world that you didn't face when you were coming out of college?
I think about this a lot because we do have young kids. And what I would give you is not my own, but I'm going to repeat someone's advice that I think is the most helpful in this case. And I want to say it was initially said by Wayne Gretzky, who is, you may or may not recognize that name. He was a very well-known hockey player. And again, whether it was his quote or he borrowed it, I don't know. But for the sake of this episode, look it up if I'm right or not. But he, I think, was famously quoted to say that when he was asked why he's so successful at the game, he said, because I skate to where the puck is going to be, not where the puck is. And I think that is more important now in terms of the question that you asked than ever before, because everything is changing so fast. Like AI is changing fundamentally every single thing in every industry, in every business, in every area. So it's really hard to plan 4 years ahead when we don't even know the new advancements we're going to have a month or 6 months from now. I think to give you some practical piece of advice is professionally, what to study. I'd say look at where the emerging areas are going to be. And if you're a technical person, develop the technical understanding of how technology actually works, because that's going to give you a huge leg up. The second thing is develop your interpersonal communication skills, because I feel like so many young people, especially those who are more into the tech part of, they're not necessarily naturally inclined. They're not extroverted by nature. And so and they spend a lot of time kind of with technology and not a lot of time with other people. And so when they graduate and they start working, they might be brilliant at the technical piece, but you still need to be able to communicate those complex things to everyday people, and they can't. And if you're a really good communicator, but you don't have the technical skills, you're going to have a hard time finding yourself a place in a company that can bridge the gap. But if you develop those two sides of your brain, and you understand how technology works, and you can communicate very complex things in a simple way, I think it doesn't really matter. If you think about the kind of job or career, like you'll definitely have a place in the future world, because I think that's what's going to be needed, is the ability to relay really complex things in simple ways. And hopefully you're doing something that you enjoy, because that's ultimately going to be the thing that makes you stick with it.
Yeah, I actually saw that today. And today I was in my APES class and kind of was off topic, but since we finished our AP test, I was kind of just talking to one of my friends kind of about some politics in the world, and I was trying to relay my message, but it kind of came across difficult, as it was hard to maybe, they were talking over me and it was kind of getting a little bit heated. I think it's really important to be able to dumb it down maybe so that anybody in any position can understand what you're trying to convey. And I think that's really important for the future in almost any business in any industry. And kind of segueing from that, what is maybe a hope that you have for the future generation, and why does it maybe give you hope?
Well, that's a really big question. What gives me hope? I mean, I feel like the younger generation, you guys are super smart. And I think that you guys grew up with such amazing, I think at a time with amazing technology and tools, and like you can do so much so fast, so well, that like in a way that's amazing. Like we didn't have those skills. So I think that's the plus side. There's the kind of the flip side of that is that, some kids don't necessarily, or young people don't necessarily develop the other skill sets, like to be resilient, to like think for yourself without being sort of succumbing to the popular opinion, which I think is true for like every young person over, human existence. But I think especially now, which is like so much of our information is coming from, random sources, untrusted sources, or from sources that don't necessarily have the right answer or the right information. I'm excited for you guys because I think you guys have amazing tools and the ability to use them. And I just hope that, I think coming back to how we began, is that you connect everything that you do with your core values, your core beliefs, and you plan ahead, like set your intentions. And you don't have to like have these crazy long, 10, 20-year plans. You can set your intention for a year. You can set your intention, quite frankly, for a day. And I think it's just a great thing to practice is to, and I know I may sound corny, but literally at the end of the day, just to like reflect on the day that just passed and say, like, take stock. What did I do well? Where did I come up short? What am I going to do better tomorrow? Like little things like that, they might seem corny, like I said, but it's like anything else. It's muscle memory. Like you start to do these things and then they become second nature. You don't even think about doing them. Your brain just does it. And that creates a tremendous amount of introspection and gratitude. And then when we wake up in the morning, we have an opportunity to make a plan. Like, what am I going to do today? And how does this connect to my bigger plan? And I think that's another really cool thing that people may not necessarily do every day, but if you can remember to do it at least every now and again, it's like connecting of all these dots. And when they fall into place, I think that's when we experience really amazing results in every aspect of our life.
I think that's just amazing. And that kind of goes to one of my questions on how you're able to handle such a workload, as I know maybe a lot of teenagers like myself, we have school and a lot of extracurriculars, which does cause a lot of stress and a lot of time management issues, I think, with maybe teenagers who aren't the best at that. So I know you run a podcast, you have a firm, and of course you have your family, and time is really limited, I think, a really limited resource for you. So how do you make room for maybe community involvement and have a way to balance all of these systems?
Thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. I think it comes back to intention, and it comes back to what's important to you. And I've always said that if the why is big enough, the how is not important, or it's not an obstacle. Like you'll figure out the how if the why is important. And for me, at least, I've always felt that, people talk about work-life balance or school-work balance. I think that's the wrong way to look at things. Because when people talk about two things in a balance, it's almost, in my brain at least, visually, I think of a teeter-totter, like one goes up, one goes down, and balances when they're perfectly level. That's not life. Maybe you'll have moments where everything is in balance, But otherwise, you're constantly on the move. Like everything is up and down, and it's never just the two things. You've got a lot of competing, like things that you want to do or have to do, and you're going in different directions, and it's the same as an adult. So to me, balance is more paying attention to things that are important and then making space intentionally for each one of those things at different times. You don't have to do all of them in a day. Sometimes you do, but don't forget the things that are important to you and come back to them. And if you feel like you're overwhelmed and there's too much on your plate, like that's the biggest thing that I continuously learn is you just got to say no to things and cut those things that are less important out so you have more of those that really are important and meaningful to you.
I think, yeah, that's just...
Saying no is hard.
Exactly. I know I personally have a really hard time saying no, especially when I think I want to do it, but I think limiting yourself to a few things that you really deeply care about is super crucial. And kind of, I think based off you and all of your achievements and what you do, I know that I think your Jewish identity is maybe a really big part of yourself. And I know your involvement in the Jewish community is super important. So what would you recommend to maybe other parents who may be potentially listening to get more involved within the Jewish community? As I know, as teenagers, we've talked a little bit about what we can do, but we never really talked about what parents can do.
It's also a really good question. I think there's so many different ways or sort of connecting points to Judaism. And it really doesn't matter which path you choose. But being connected, I think, to a Jewish way of life, for me at least, unexpectedly, and not unexpectedly, I didn't expect it because I didn't know it. Like I didn't think that there was going to be this kind of feedback or this value that I'm going to get back from being connected to living a Jewish life or being part of a Jewish community until I got connected to someone in the Jewish community. And it's just like, one thing after the next. And what I would say is just become connected to the Jewish community in some way. And I think because then as a parent, you'll bring those things home and hopefully be able to pass it on to your kids. And hopefully your kids will listen, because I think not always the case. But if you have like really young kids, I would say give them an opportunity to develop Jewish identity. So that starts, in preschool, in summer camps. Like you put little kids into summer camp programs, that's their pathway. And I think then they'll find their own way. And as parents, for us at least, we definitely made a decision to engage our kids in Jewish life. And then we try to do that at home as well.
I think it's beautiful. I know my parents as well, I think, did that as well. In my life, I went to sometimes occasional Jewish summer camps. That really helped. And I think one of the biggest factors was when I had my bar mitzvah, we actually went to Israel a little bit before the October 7th attack. And I think going there and seeing how beautiful the place was, how friendly the people were, and kind of connecting with that heritage, and then eventually seeing what people could do to the people I kind of met, really impassioned me and gave me fuel to want to learn more and do more as I could.
Robbie, I'm going to change my answer because you said it way better than I did in far less time. Message to the parents, take your kids to Israel. Go on vacation, see what it's like. I absolutely agree with you. It's every single time we've been to Israel, it is such a transformative, expansive experience that I always come back going, oh my God, I just want to go back.
I think I'm going to have to, third that. I mean, I grew up, I think, similar. I'm also like the second generation of Soviet Jewish immigrants. So I grew up like most Bay Area secular Jews, wasn't really, strong about my Jewish identity. And I actually went to Israel the summer right before October 7th too. And, at that point, if someone asked me if I was Jewish, I would probably shrug, be like, I think I'm Jewish, I don't know much about it. And then when I returned that summer, if I got the same question, I'd be, of course I'm Jewish, That's part of my identity. You both hit the nail. I think the trip to Israel is, at least for me, definitely for Robbie too, it solidified my identity. I think that was the first time where I really, kind of inexplicably, it's kind of like not just a spiritual, but, it's not fully describable in words, I'd say, what happens to your connection to Judaism once you visit Israel. It feels like, that 2,000-year-old connection has finally been like put together, and it, your whole is actually back. And I think it's beautiful to see, how far we've come from, the situation you described in the Soviet Union, where your family had to repress their identity, and there was the mixing between the Soviet and the Jewish traditions, and you weren't aware, connected to your Jewish community when you came. And now look at you. I mean, you're a prominent advocate in our community, and you're definitely carrying the torch to your kids and the next generation. So I think that's a great Jewish resilience story.
Mark, that was and Robbie both. I love what you guys just said, and it also makes me go back to one of the questions you said, or you asked me earlier, like what gives you hope. What you just said is the biggest thing that gives me hope for your guys' generation, because all the challenges that we as a Jewish community are facing, not just here, but around the world and in Israel. But how cool is if more young people like yourselves said, I have a very strong and proud Jewish identity connected to the land of Israel. And the fact that you feel that way, that's what gives me the most hope. Good for you guys. That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. I think that's also something I hope to see more in my Jewish peers and Jewish friends around me. If they ask me like one thing about why I'm such a proud Jewish kid, or why it's so important to me in the state of Israel, I tell them we'll just visit, and then we'll have a talk when you come back. So
that's yeah.
I think we have one final question for you, just to wrap this up. What is one piece of advice, if you had to choose, you had to leave for our viewers to take away, maybe targeted at a teenage audience, or one that's entering college, about our age?
That's an easy question for me to answer, because it's always my answer. It is have a mentor. And that mentor, like we started in the beginning, can be just about anybody. It does not have to be a mentor with the badge that says, hi, I'm a mentor. But have a mentor. I say this to my kids all the time, because obviously I can't be a mentor to my own kids. They don't listen necessarily. I'm sure they do. I say this obviously jokingly, and I think you guys would probably say the same, but you don't always appear to be listening, but we do listen to our parents. There's a lot of what they say that stays with us, but it's different to have a relationship with someone that you sit with, you go to advice and you say, what am I not seeing? Or what's around that corner? Because they've been there, they know what to expect. And this is maybe this is not an answer that I would give to a non-Jewish person or in a podcast like this, but I would add, start studying the Torah. And the reason for that is, I think the Torah is the greatest mentor that we can have. And the reason I say that is, as a non-learned Jewish person who has only recently began to study the Torah, but in the study that I have done, what I realize is that the Torah is a combination of thousands of years worth of wisdom, advice through stories, and they help us deal with any modern day situation, despite the fact that they were written thousands of years ago. It's just a combination. If you could take all of the mentors that you would ever want to have, whether it's in athletic, or academic, or family, or friends, personally, there's a story on that, because thousands of years ago, hundreds of thousands of people have probably over the history have experienced those things. And there are so many lessons in the Torah. So I'm going to stop talking, because I don't want to bore your audience, but have a mentor, a human being, or start learning the Torah. And you'll find a lot of answers, a lot of wisdom, and a lot of grounding and directional lessons that will really help you.
I just want to say thank you so much. I know you've definitely, I think, been a mentor to me, at least within the podcast as well. I know you've helped me a lot and given me ideas. And I know this really, I think, was for me at least, a really informative talk. And I think I will reflect on it, I think, a great deal and grow from it.
Likewise for me too, definitely. I definitely took a lot of mental and physical notes on what you said. I think also the Torah is great advice. I think it's a great moral or ethical foundation for a lot of people to have. And I think studying or reading some stories from it would be very helpful and applicable. Thank you very much for being here and for all your sage advice. We appreciate it, and our viewers will too, definitely.
Thank you both to you, Mark and Robbie. Thank you. I love that you guys are doing this. Kol kavod. That's amazing. And that your listeners are lucky to have you guys doing this project. And I wish you all the very, very best.
Thank you so much.
Take care, you guys.